Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello everyone, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. I hope this video podcast finds you healthy, safe. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. My mother went into the hospital last night. She's in her mid to late 80s. And so we've had a pandemic now. We're going on 2 years. So a lot of us are getting sick and ending up in facilities. And anyway, so that's on the back of my mind. I'll try not to let that distract me. We are talking about the 10 worlds, and I'm already reading myself back into the 3,000 realms. I tried many years ago. I did an entire series of videos on the 3,000 realms and the origins of life. And at that time, my focus was to secularize the conversation. Because for contemporary folks, we folk of the West and of a very science literate, informed people, most if not all of us have heard something about quantum mechanics and quantum theory. We've discussed issues about time. Is it real? Is it not? How is space and time integrated? How do they create one another? All those kinds of talks. Without getting too technical, I tried to approach the Buddhist cosmology and the 3,000 realms and the circle of life process. And those videos stand for what they were at the time. I would like to reinvestigate the 3,000 realms this go round with more a literal translation and understanding from the teachings themselves. Still, I secularize everything, right? That's who I am. But I just want to approach it from another angle because it is a critical thing to understand in our practice, which can sometimes seem like so many things, just repetitive. But then what isn't? Well, how repetitive is the alarm clock going off in the morning and you hitting snooze 3 times before you drag your butt out of bed? How repetitive is eating that same breakfast you eat every morning on your way to work, or those preferred foods that you like to prepare in the evening, and for some, that glass of wine that you have to have before you can sit and relax. And we have myriad habits, and so one way you can look at your Buddhist practice is that you're developing the ultimate practice for development of your highest potential, your happiness, your ungluing yourself from things that are dissatisfying and disarming and diseasing, and liberate yourself, right? So what a great habit to have. But even so, even if maybe that's all you need is to know that you have found a really good habit to nurture your life. Great. Practice Buddhism that way. For others, like myself, who tend to get influenced by a certain sense of boredom and repetition, it's critical for us to study. And some of us like to study just by reading. Maybe it's just the Gosho, Nichiren's writing. Or maybe you're more curious and you want to dig deeper. Like Nichiren references some things that just leave you kind of, what's that? Those are points of departure for digging what some would call, some of you have even told me, going down rabbit holes, right? I kind of like going down rabbit holes. Not all the time, but every now and again, okay, I'm going to settle into this one and just start chewing. And, it's funny. Sometimes you find things that you go, what the heck is that? And then you'll find something else and you go, yeah, that's what I thought. What is this idiot saying? Don't mean to qualify it as idiots, but it's just to point out that if you're going to study, and especially in rabbit holes, make sure that you study broadly from many sources. The truth will out, the clear thinking will out, and then those sections where things go awry, you can detect quite quickly hidden agendas. And also that's also helpful to know too, because then when you're talking to others about your practice and they bring up something from that camp because that's all they know, you can, with some education and some knowledge, with some knowing, you can redirect their thoughts and maybe suggest a different source so that they too can come to a clear understanding, right? So, this is the nature of the world. We can't get angry at people who are misled. We simply need to guide them out of their misleadings. Some people can be staunch about it, and you just don't need to waste a whole lot of time on that unless it's somebody that you really, really, truly care about. And as a bodhisattva, then you must redirect them. To not redirect them is actually to be complicit in their misunderstanding. So Buddhism's strict that way. Again, that's not a small factor in my thinking about reinvestigating the 3,000 realms, because honestly, that was one of those things I kept hearing repeated, like Ichinen Sanzen, 3,000 realms. What the heck? Okay, generally I get it, and let's move on. But at some point, that becomes a nagging little voice like, you're saying you get it, but do you? Do you really know what that's about? And maybe everything you're putting on top of it is unstable because you really don't know that foundation. So this is why I'm going to attempt to reinvestigate the 3,000 realms for us. And as I'm supposed to be talking about the life condition of Buddhahood, it's no accident that I'm talking about the 3,000 realms. And I would like to actually read an excerpt. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is the 10 factors of life. The other is the 3 realms of existence. Here's these numbers again. But these are referenced in the multiplication of the 3,000 realms. Now, we've been talking about the 10 worlds, right? Well, that's one of the multipliers. And already you should be quite aware that the 10 worlds are no simple matter to understand. We've got these 10 convenient labels, and they don't necessarily mean what we think they do via the dictionary, right? Like anger isn't at all what we think of as anger. What we think of as anger is more akin to rage, which is the world of hell. The world of anger in Buddhism is a manipulative kind of, I guess the word anger arises from our dystopian or negative competitive power struggle with other people. So there's a sense of inhumanity in the way that we use others or get used ourselves. And that's kind of a swampy feeling. And identify that as anger because it's anger against your enlightenment. So Buddhism always comes from the standpoint that you should be working for your enlightenment. And if you're not, what the hell's going on? What's wrong? Right? Just like tranquility. Really has nothing to do with tranquility. It has to do with stagnancy. And that's unacceptable. That's inhumane. But we've been taught in the West that tranquility is an objective thing where our minds are serene and we commune with the divine in tranquility. Well, not in Buddhism. Tranquility is a position of stasis, and that's not living at all. That's emulating death. You can't stop the mind from thinking, and any practice that says we need to quell and stop our thinking and our minds, well, that's suicide. The mind is life. Hello? You see how divergent our training is in our societies and so forth? Right? So I wanted to read a little something from Tanisaru Bhikkhu, who did this work on the 5 aggregates, sometimes called the 5 components. This, I think, is probably the most misunderstood and most difficult to understand secular teaching of early Buddhism. And I don't think that you have to know this teaching inside and out to appreciate what it suggests. But I think that I need to spend some time talking about it with you, because if you begin to understand what the skandhas are, the khandas, depending if you're using Pali or Sanskrit, these are early teachings. What they indicate, what the Nidana talks about, and what that great book by Julius Evola talks about, The Doctrine of Awakening, these early teachings dissecting human nature of the mind, the process. How do we come to see and instantiate a self? What is happening there? What does that construction look like? Well, obviously, the whole idea of that is integral to the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. See, we think when we hear 3,000 realms or Ichinen Sanzen or the 10 worlds, we think of places our mind goes as from the standpoint of who we are now. But we never really question who we are now. And that is a critical aspect of understanding the 3,000 realms. Because what is the word that has been left out of this dialogue so far? Karma. This basic thing that most people, unless they're Buddhist and studying, even many Buddhists, don't understand karma. Especially in the West, with all of our religions influencing us, retribution, good, bad, what goes around comes around, right? Even in our discussions of cause and effect, we look at them through those religious lenses, and that is absolutely not what karma is. You've heard me say many times, karma is energy plus work. Well, that's fine for an industrialized nation of people who understand work and energy of a sort. But when we get to the skandhas or the khandas or the aggregates or the components, we start to understand this mechanism that we call work, and how those energies are formed and forming tendencies and conditions that together amalgamate into something we think of as a known, a basis for thought, an opinion, an emotion, a construction of all of these things that buoys up an idea of I am. This is me. See, we don't question that enough. And it isn't critical that you know this, but if you begin to dig down into this rabbit hole and you begin to understand how you are just an assembly of things that you don't ever pay attention to, you just kind of respond to, then when you're chanting to your mandala for Buddhahood and the clarity that you're demanding, your Buddha-ness, instantiate my Buddha, instantiate it now, what do you think that's going to be like? What do you think that's actually asking of you? And to understand how you come into being as this assemblages of forces that you know just very little about, this awakening is going to penetrate through all of that to shake it into an order that allows you to understand fully who you are, what you are, how you are, and cleanse that of all the misperceptions and non-life affirming tendencies that are just numerous beyond number within this idea of you. That kind of, even that, as confusing as that sounds, clearing that mess up, now you start to understand the nature of what you're invoking. That's no small thing. This ain't no gold badge you're going to wear. This is life-altering, life-changing. Not life with a capital L, but your life. Because that's what's out of rhythm, out of concert, out of the vibratory essence of this life process that results in this instantiation. I like this. I want to hang on to this. But I want this to be more secure, less fragile, larger in the sense of embracing more of life and less of fear, more filled up in that place I feel, I don't know, discontent, a hole, unfilled, unfulfilled. I don't want to ask the whys anymore, because why is just, talk about rabbit holes. There's no end to that one. That's really a black hole. It just sucks all your energy. I don't want to ask why anymore. I don't want to feel like I have to ask why. I want to know Buddha-ness. I want to know what my role is, how I function in this universe, in this society, in this body. How do I function? What is important? What is not? What is essential? What is trivial? I don't want to have to discern those things. I want to know. See, these are the bigger questions that invoking your Buddha nature demands. But they're big questions that we don't utter to one another because they're so big that the nervous response is going to be, you're nuts. But as Buddhists, we're answering those questions every time we chant the Daimoku, the teachings of Shakyamuni, the enlightenment that is part and parcel of what we are. We just have truckloads of other crap blocking our understanding, our experience of. And so understanding these components gives us a little bit of a tool set just to add. It's kind of like, I don't know, here's another bad analogy, the cooking analogy. Right? Who doesn't put a little salt and pepper on just about everything they cook? Right? Or if you're a baker, a little nutmeg in there, or a little cinnamon, or a little something something. Right? We all have these predilections, these things that this is what we do. This is how you do it. But without it, we're sure as hell aware. So the 3,000 realms is like that. It's preparing your mind. So the thing I wanted to read on this was really kind of, I thought, well written on the Buddha's awakening. And this thing we call language, communicating this teaching. And what Shakyamuni had to deal with, what Siddhartha had to deal with in order to convey to people these ideas that they'd never heard of before, that they had no basis for understanding before. And in some cases, he had to invent terminology, and in other cases, he had to use common terms that people knew, but add a whole different meaning to them to make it easier for them to understand. And so this is his introduction to the khandhas. And I thought it would be instrumental to read. The Buddha's awakening gave him, among other things, a new perspective on the uses and limitations of words. He had discovered a reality, the deathless, that no words could describe. Right? What is deathless? What does that bring to mind? Something that lives forever? No. That would be probably your first assumption, especially as a Westerner, but I think anyone, if it's deathless, then it's invincible. It lives forever. Deathless is a reference to the fact that everything is momentary and in flux. And the fact that something doesn't exist in and of itself, that it arises out of many, many conditions, means that it truly was never born. There is just some point in time we identify as a type of birth, a human birth, for instance. But the energies and amalgams that represent what came together in that human birth, they themselves have been born of other previous energies and tendencies and conditions. And you can go all the way back until there was nothing but a stir in the potential. And then the work began. Karma. From the energy of potential, something came together, something instantiated. Work happened. Karma. And then more work, and karma. Builds and builds and builds. Until karmically, a human is instantiated in a womb, along with karma from a couple of other sources, and agglomerating all of that karma together. And now comes you. And so in order to understand how you got here, you kind of have to understand how all this Ichinen Sanzen, karma prior to your birth, came together to express itself as you. That's some heavy stuff. That's stuff that doesn't seem very clear, that's very ethereal, that's very mystical. But it's not. There's no mysticism in Buddhism. So how the hell is Shakyamuni going to convince people that, number one, this is how they got here? No, my mom got me here. I was born out of orange juice or something. My dad did something to my mom, and together they made me. That's perhaps the mundane understanding. That's the caveman understanding. But there's actually a hell of a lot more to it. Are you ready to know what that is? And what the hell do you call it? At that same time, he discovered that the path to awakening could be described, although it involved a new way of seeing and conceptualizing the problem of suffering and stress. And here, this gentleman uses the word stress, what we would normally call, in Mahayana anyway, the formations of attachments, right? The initial sufferings come from this gluing, this clinging, this craving. Well, that's stress. Because ordinary concepts were often poor tools for teaching the path, he had to invent new concepts and to stretch pre-existing words to encompass those concepts so that others could taste awakening themselves. It's what I've been saying in my own words, right? One of the new concepts most central to his teaching was that of the khandhas, usually translated into English as aggregates. Prior to the Buddha, the Pali word khandha was very ordinary meaning. A khandha could be a pile, a bundle, a heap, a mass. It could also be the trunk of a tree. In his first sermon, though, the Buddha gave it a new psychological meaning, introducing the term clinging khandhas. To summarize his analysis of the truth of stress and suffering. Throughout the remainder of his teaching career, he referred to these psychological khandhas time and again. Their importance in his teaching has thus been obvious to every generation of Buddhists ever since. Okay. Less obvious, though, has been the issue of how they are important. How should a meditator make use of the concept of the psychological khandhas? What questions are they meant to answer? The most common response to these questions is best exemplified by two recent scholarly books devoted to the subjects. Both treat the khandhas as the Buddha's answer to the question, what is a person? To quote from the jacket of the first, quote, if Buddhism denies a permanent self, how does it perceive identity? What we conventionally call a person can be understood in terms of 5 aggregates, the sum of which must not be taken for a permanent entity, since beings are nothing but an amalgam of ever-changing phenomena. Without a thorough understanding of the 5 aggregates, we cannot grasp the liberation process at work within the individual, who is, after all, simply an amalgam of the 5 aggregates. Is this getting you interested? The third key teaching is given by the Buddha in context when he is asked about individual identity. When people, this is from another book, when people want to know, what am I? What is my real self? The Buddha says that individuality should be understood in terms of a combination of phenomena which appear to form the physical and mental continuum of an individual life. In such context, the human being is analyzed into 5 constituents. The Pancakanda, the 5 aggregates. So now Bhikkhu goes on. This understanding of the khandas isn't confined to scholars. Almost any modern Buddhist meditation teacher would explain the khandas in a similar way. And it isn't a modern innovation. It was first proposed at the beginning of the Common Era in the commentaries to the early Buddhist canons, both the Theravada and Sarvastivada, which formed the basis for Mahayana scholasticism. See, Mahayana is given the moniker of scholasticism, the scholarship of Buddhism. However, once the commentaries used the khandas to define what a person is, they spawned many of the controversies that have plagued Buddhist thinking ever since. If a person is just khandas, then what gets reborn? If a person is just khandas, and the khandas are annihilated on reaching total nibbana, then isn't the total nibbana the annihilation of the person? If a person is khandas, and khandas are interrelated with other khandas, how can one person enter nibbana without dragging everyone else along? So, I've already deciphered a lot of that for you in my talks on life and death, life being moment-to-moment process. What is that process? It is the khandas instantiating. What are the khandas? Here, I'll give you just a taste, because I think he lists them here. Yeah. The 5 khandas are bundles or piles or of form, feeling, perception, fabrications, and consciousness. Now, I wouldn't use the word fabrications, but he's talking about cognition, perception, right? And I've brought these things before, but the khandas are a way of looking at the consciousnesses in the human existence, in being. What is the process of being, and what is it that is being? And the argument in Buddhism, and the descriptive that the 5 aggregates are about, is that we are our collection of consciousnesses. And in my book, Beyond Zen, I talk about the 9 consciousnesses, right? And the first 6 are the ones we know: sight, eye consciousness, visual consciousness, because visual consciousness isn't just the eye, right? The eye is just a reader of light. Then the optical nerve carries the messages from the eye to a part of the brain that dissembles and reassembles that light information into what we think of, the mind, as red, yellow, blue, ultraviolet, can't see it, infrared, can't see it, don't need that information. We need to make a picture, and that picture is what we'll know we're looking at. But it's only a partial picture, because there's a lot of the light spectrum that doesn't even enter our minds, to quote an oft-said statement. Didn't enter my mind. And we have science fiction movies about creatures that can... On this planet, we have creatures that can see into the ultraviolet or the infrared. Why don't we? Why can't we use that information? How would we use that information? Do you see, just by exploring the eye consciousness, we become aware of how our experience has great specificity. It's very directed. It could be more, but it's not. It's just this. What does that limitation cause us to experience, to know, to understand? How different would our experience be if we could see heat? And that's just one consciousness. That consciousness is a construct of many amalgams of energy coming together to experience something, and therefore a construct of tissue, neurology, all this construct of the brain and conduit to eye receptor, all constructed from this need, this clinging desire to see. That's what's clinging. That's the khandha, that consciousness, and how that consciousness communicates to our mind. Now you understand clinging at a different level. It's not just that you like chocolate. It's that your mouth waters the moment you see chocolate. That clinging khandha, that rush to open a gift to see what's inside, clinging khandha, clinging consciousness. I just referred to another khandha, taste, the mouth sensation. There's another khandha, touch, feeling. All working in concert to give you a certain perception of the world you inhabit, the worlds you inhabit. Thought, yet another khandha. I like to think. But don't think by ending thinking that you will be entering enlightenment, because thought is essential to your experience of not only samsara and all these khandhas, but the ninth consciousness of Buddhahood. Yeah, there's a lot of layers here. That's why I want to take my time this time. And I want to use the words from Buddhism, because I think even though they can be poetic and some of them have certain agendas from early Buddhist teachings and early Mahayana, that ultimately they all serve the same purpose. They get us to a deeper understanding of the Lotus Sutra, of why or how, sorry, I said why, of how, by invoking the clarity of the nine consciousnesses through our Buddha-ness, we can see right through down into the khandhas, the nature of all life. And when you have that kind of profound understanding of life, so much of it is less mysterious, less ominous, less charged, less to fear, more to experience gently, with great joy, this passions of life, right? So, the only way I can describe the 10th world is by digging into the 3,000 realms. Because only here will we get an inkling. And one other place, one other important place where you can experience this Buddha-ness. You know what it is. Sit down in front of your mandala, chant the Daimoku, fuse with your mandala. What are you fusing? Your Gohonzon, your internal mind's path to Buddha-ness. And experience it for yourself. See how wordless it is. And deathless, because it's constant. It's never born. It always exists. in the life process, and so it never dies. The only thing that can die are things that are born. Nothing is ever truly born. It's a process of amalgams that instantiate for moment to moment and decay and then stop. They go away. They go to extinction. In other words, they no longer form. That's not annihilation. That's not destruction. That is simply the nature of the process. A wave comes and appears in a huge body of water. The wave is the water. The water is the wave. The wave is just a feature of the water. And it appears, and then it does its thing, and it goes away. Does the wave self-destruct? It's water. It forms, it does its thing, it decays, and it goes away. The wave is extinct, but the water's all there. But that's not a soul. That's not a bag of you. Because there never was a bag. There never was a you. Now the mind is spinning. What are you talking about? There never was a you. There's a you. There's an experience of a you. And the idea of a you is a samsaric condition. And that samsaric condition is a contained element of the wave. Samsara is the wave. And samsara only comes into being when certain conditions exist on this large body of water so that it can manifest, and then it diffuses. And samsara is no more. So those consciousnesses are no more. Because they only arose, instantiated, decayed, and disappeared. They just like a wave. The process of life continues. All right. Talking about Buddha-ness is so individual that only you can come to your own definition of it. When you reach it, you'll know it. When you fuse with your mandala and it becomes three-dimensional and you're in it. And your samsaric mind is trying to go, what the hell is going on here? And then shutting up completely because you're just in it. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. And you tingle and you feel every vibration of your daimoku right through to your toes into the floor. And then you don't know time. How long have I been chanting? How long have I been in this? And then you keep it going until whenever you're satiated. And you stop. And when you stop and you look away from your mandala, everything is like that. I won't even try to use words, but you'll know it. And maybe that makes you study. Maybe that makes you promulgate. Maybe that makes you watch more videos. Whatever it does, you will appreciate what enlightenment feels like. And all of this study that I do, that I try to share, is because in trying to find the words, I go to the teachings, because they're there. But it's just like anything else, you know. It's like the first time you really focus in on, maybe you're buying a new car, and you saw this new color red that you've never seen before. And suddenly you're going, man, I saw that red in person of that particular model, of that particular maker, and I love that red. And it's like the whole car changes for you just because you love that red. And the interior is not so special, but it is to you because you love that red. And suddenly, everywhere you go before you buy that car, this red is everywhere. Where did all this red come from? And that's what happens when you chant to your mandala, when you awaken your Gohanzan and your Buddha-ness. Suddenly, rereading the same words you may have read before and just glazed on, now every other word you just go, yes, I get that. Human beings. Wow. What a process. This is one of the great thrills of studying Buddhism, is these moments where we can't believe what we didn't know and now know. It's it's mind-boggling. But it's the kind of thing that keeps us practicing and deepens our resolve. That's why study is such an important component of our practice, if for those moments alone. All right, enough blah, blah, blah. I hope that gave you an inkling of what Buddha-ness is about, that world. Remember that it exists in all the others. And as we'll see, all of them have these khandhas in the three realms of existence and through the perception of the 10 factors. Yeah, we got lots to talk about. So I think the next one is I'll go to the three realms of existence, because that's where we're going to first encounter the realm of the aggregates. That's the first of the three realms of existence. The second is the realm of living beings. The third is the realm of the environment. And we've talked a lot on those in different terminologies. But every now and again, I'm going to dig into these khandhas a little bit, just to expand your perception of what we're doing here. Okay? In the meantime, take care of your health. You want to make sure you're even-handedly using all your khandhas. Be kind to yourself. There's a lot going on in you and in everyone you know, because they're also you. They're parts of you. I so appreciate you guys. I can't even express, so I won't. Like, subscribe, share. Let's do this together. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks again. Bye-bye.